there's all this talk about, how you pick a vice presidential running mate. Do you pick the vice presidential running mate that's supposed to help you govern? Do you pick the vice presidential running mate that's supposed to help you get elected? Do you pick the vice presidential running mate who compensates for something that's obviously wrong with you? Like, there's all these different approaches to it. When it comes to actually getting elected, do vice presidential selections ever actually help?
Rarely do they matter a ton. They can help, and we were just talking about this during the break, they can help marginally, I think. So, for example, with Barack Obama, he picked Joe Biden. Some of the other finalists were also middle to later-aged older white men, right, who were giving comfort to people who may not have been ready to vote for the first black man to be president. I think Nicole was referencing Dick Cheney may have helped George W. Bush give some credibility on foreign policy, right? And Joe Biden did that for Barack Obama as well. But Ohio was lost to the Democrats. I'm not trying to be dark on this already dark time. It is not a state that Democrats are actually competing in. So that's not a state that Trump needs J.D. Vance to win. I think if you look at his statements and what Michael Beschloss and others have been talking about, specifically that he will help Donald Trump if he loses the election, he will go and get fake electors and support him in that and do what Mike Pence did not do, feels much more likely to be what was on the mind of somebody who loves loyalists. I'll also note one of the things that Donald Trump said in his post was that he talked about Hillbilly Elegy becoming a major bestseller and movie, which I do think may have been not the first point, but maybe point 4 or 5 in his list
Why he picked him.
pluses.
His book sold a lot. Alex, what do you think about the J.D. Vance choice?
I think you have to separate what he does for Trump from what he does for Trumpism, because in a lot of ways, Vance is kind of the intellectual, ideological heir to MAGA and is seen as kind of the vanguard of the new right. I mean, MAGA is a emotional, sort of grievance-filled movement, but Vance practices it in a much more sort of, if you will, cerebral, circumscribed fashion, which is to say, I mean, there's a very clear sort of isolationist foreign policy bent to much of what he's done. There's the sheen of economic populism, even though he's not a great supporter of labor unions. There's a hearkening back to the sort of hardcore conservatism that was popularized between World War I and World War II, which you know a lot about, Rachel, that they seek to sort of move forward into the 21st century. And I think, quietly in Washington, while not a lot of people have been paying attention, J.D. Vance has been part of grassroots efforts among donors, among, new staffers on Capitol Hill to re-energize MAGA and make it not re-energize it, but effectively build it for the 21st century.
Institutionalize
it post-Trump. And in that way, it's a very, I think, important pick for the movement, right? Like, he is going to carry the torch forward in a way and potentially more effectively than even Donald Trump could if they get into office, given, I think, the certain sort of discipline with which he's operated in Washington, D.C.
Even though he hasn't been a public official for except for about the last 5 minutes.
He's been very shrewd in terms of forging alliances, making a name for himself, and getting in with the Heritage Foundation, the head of the Heritage Foundation, the donor community, and the new sort of vanguard of conservative politics.
Look, Mitt Romney has a great quote in McKay Coppins where he basically says, I couldn't disrespect anyone more than I disrespect J.D. Vance. I think the thing about Trump that's interesting is he's still mad at Deborah Messing and Jeff Zucker for not being grateful enough that he made them when he was a TV person, right? You read Ramin Sotoudeh. He is a grudge-filled guy. And so what is it? What is the X factor that lets him overlook J.D. Vance calling him an idiot, America's Hitler, basically useless and worthless and less than his dog as a future president? What is it? And I think we may be overthinking it. If the tragic events of Saturday night hadn't happened, we'd all be talking about, we might even have a special talking about the reporting that you referenced. Jim Rutenberg and Nick Corsinides reporting about exactly how they plan to do the coup this time. And J.D. Vance is all those things. But to Trump, he doesn't care about the policy. He'll probably never read he'll never read Hillbilly Elegy. He'll never get past page 1 of the 600-page blueprint for the Project 2025 effort. But J.D. Vance will.
Yeah.
And the only part of it Trump cares about is the Day One project, which is doing what Mike Pence wouldn't. And Donald Trump doesn't care about many of the vestiges of his first term, but he'll never get over what Mike Pence wouldn't do. He called him the P word. And if we played one piece of tape from January 6th, it would be the interview of Ivanka Trump's assistant recounting how horrible that call was, how icky Ivanka felt about the things her father called Mike Pence, the P word among them. And Donald Trump's regret is that Pence wouldn't do the thing that would have kept him in office. So he wasn't looking for a policy partner. He doesn't give a rat's behind if Trumpism endures beyond his purposes. But J.D. Vance will do the one thing Pence wouldn't.
The other thing that I think that Vance brings that's going to be really consequential for the world, both just with them as a ticket, even if they don't win, is that he is even more radical on the issue of Ukraine than Trump is. I mean, Trump is already promising that if he is elected, America will switch sides in that war and get out of NATO. And he thinks that NATO should collapse. He is also inviting Russia to attack our NATO allies. And he says he's essentially saying that he would support Russia's aims in the Ukraine war. That is going to be such a world-shaking thing. But to know that his running mate is there to effectuate that just as much as anything else that's motivating Vance in his politics right now, I think is going to be consequential. It's going to be consequential for the world even before we have the election. I just want to say for a second, Tim Scott is about to speak, and we're going to take a little bit of his remarks, if only because I mean, Tim Scott was on the short list to be the running mate pick and did not get it. And so it'll be interesting to see how he handles that. So, Joy, I'm going to go to you right now, but then let's just keep an eye on this to see when Tim Scott comes out.
I just want to say he was never going to get it. I think that,
so?
No, I think that to Nicole's point, I think we might sometimes overthink it because we still try to fit what Donald Trump does into the mind of a politician. But I think to the points that I think we've all made here, he doesn't care about that. The head of the Heritage Foundation came out and praised the pick of J.D. Vance. He cares about that because he sees him as the vanguard of this new right.
He said that's who we were rooting for.
That's who we were rooting for. And so he's like, good, score. Yeah. But for Donald Trump, just my own little research on him when I did my Trump book is that Donald Trump is much more simple and venal. He did a casting decision. Donald Trump says that guy looks the way I think that a president or a vice president should look. He fits the casting. And I will just give you one statistic. The statistics are 31 and 23. If you look at the bar graphs between 2016 and 2020, Joe Biden only, slightly changes the difference between Hillary Clinton outperformed him, let's just say. Hillary Clinton outperformed Joe Biden with black women, black men, Latinos. She actually did better than Joe Biden. The place that Joe Biden's money was made, how he became president, Joe Biden's a white working class man, and he did 9 points better with white men. The reason that Donald Trump feared Joe Biden and wanted to destroy Joe Biden is Joe Biden is a threat to his core. He did better with white men. And so they had no need to try to, quote unquote, DEI. Because they have launched a war against diversity. The idea of picking a diverse person, a woman, a person of color, a black person, would have offended the project. The project is white men. The project is advancing the interests of white Christian men. J.D. Vance visually meets that test, and he also helps them double down on the thing Joe Biden stole from him in 2020, which is the white guys.
But the difference between 2020 and 2024, demographically in terms of the vote, may be Dobbs, maybe the Roe decision.
Absolutely.
And if Democrats can put the pedal to the actual metal when it comes to mobilizing a female vote, both among Democrats, but also among independents, potentially among Republicans, they can neutralize whatever other sort of demographic shaving they could do with that.
Democrats have had a really rough few weeks. This is the best news that Democrats have gotten, at least in a month. Picking J.D. Vance is saying to women, go to hell. And this is going to be the best thing that could have possibly happened to a ticket that's got a woman former sex crimes prosecutor on it.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.